Hey, don't worry. 2025 is over. It's behind us. We can move on. But before we do, I'd like to talk a bit more about it. At least aspects of the year. Games of the year. My name is Stephen Hilger. I'm an artist, writer, and co-host of the video game podcast Into the Aether. On this channel, I like making videos about games that I love. And while the GOTY tradition is perhaps a bit silly and definitely worthy of criticism, I think it can also be a rewarding exercise to look back and determine what games resonated with us the most on a personal level. On that note, I've got some lists for you, okay? We're going to switch between two of them. One list is my top 5 favorite games that came out in 2025, and the other list is my favorite games that I played in 2025, but are from years past. GOTYs and GOTOYs, games of the other years. Also, this video will largely be spoiler-free. I won't be touching on plot for most of the games, and I've selected footage that I generally think is spoiler-free out of context, but I'll give you a heads up if anything changes. With that established, let's not delay the main event any longer. Here are my favorite games that I played in 2025. Jeanne d'Arc is the kind of game you have to convince people actually exists. The very premise feels like a vaguely forgotten dream that keeps resurfacing in one's mind. Yes, the rumors are all true. In 2007, Level 5, the people that brought you Professor Layton, Ni no Kuni, and Yangus made a tactics RPG based on the patron saint of France, Joan of Arc. The game's story is a delightfully bizarre hybrid of the real legend meshed with high fantasy and dramatic Sailor Moon-esque transformation sequences. Mechanically, Jeanne d'Arc will feel familiar for any fans of tactical RPGs. It may not have the memorable cast of Fire Emblem or the masterful narratives of Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre, but Jeanne d'Arc succeeds at being player-friendly in a way those other games almost flaunt not being. I can think of few genres harder to get into than tactics games or SRPGs. Not only do the games usually not bother teaching you the basic rules of play, but if you seek help from people experienced in this genre, they will often get mad at you for having the audacity to play their favorite game. There's basically no good way to learn, but don't worry, Joan's got your back. Jeanne d'Arc starts off very basic, teaching the player about movement, commands, and positioning. We then learn about the unique strengths of each unit and how transforming works before the game gives us more control over the characters. The way Jeanne d'Arc teaches its combat reminds me of the beginning of Fire Emblem: The Blazing Blade, where we learned the basics of Fire Emblem with Lyn and crew. One of the only times Fire Emblem has bothered to explain how to play. Thank you! I found the best tutorials let you feel like you're already playing the game, even if the full game hasn't unlocked yet. For veterans of the genre, Jeanne d'Arc still offers a unique experience. It almost feels like a minimalist take on the genre, not because it's easy, but because it's focused. Matches are much faster, there are fewer units, and a greater weight for your actions on each turn. The signature mechanic of transforming also allows characters to act again if they defeat an enemy, which helps keep matches concise and exciting. If you're new to the genre, this game will give you the general vocabulary that you'll need going into more advanced games. And if you already love the genre but missed this one, Jeanne d'Arc will remind you of the core elements that make this style of game so special. Here we are, Hades 2. I have such conflicting thoughts, which is ironic given the game's high placement in this video. Every draft I come up with for this section ends up accidentally reading like a breakup text. I love so many elements of this game, but if I'm being honest with myself, I also feel very disappointed by other aspects of it. Let me start by saying that I am, was, and always will be a huge fan of Supergiant's work. Playing Bastion for the first time in 2011 really changed my perception of what a game could look and sound like, and Transistor doubled down on Supergiant's unique style and approach to game design. Pyre, in my opinion, remains their most imaginative game, and while I didn't enjoy the Blitzball half as much as I wanted to, I found the choice-driven narrative extremely compelling. Playing Pyre also made me realize that Supergiant's games are all interested in similar ideas and themes. To varying degrees, all of their games take place in a version of purgatory, where the only escape is through some form of selfless act or gesture of love. These recurring themes are literalized in the first Hades, a game about repeatedly trying to escape the underworld in a Sisyphus-esque loop. Oh hey, there he is. Not only is Hades laser focused on the ideas that are near the heart of Supergiant, but Hades also feels like a mashup of all of the best pieces from their library. The way Hades seamlessly connects run-based, roguelike gameplay with a perfectly paced coming-of-age narrative that adapts to how you're playing it is nothing short of miraculous. I also tend to love games that have a hub world to invest in and social sim elements, so for me, Hades is truly a perfect game. What makes Hades 2 so hard to judge is that I just spent the last few minutes telling you why Hades is my favorite game, and Hades 2 is almost objectively better in many ways. Mechanically, the game is perfect. The amount of fun I have simply sitting here and thinking about how good the axe feels, that thought is more fun than many actual games I've played. It's very clear how much love went into this game. Its art direction, its vocal performances, the writing, the music, the craft of making this game alone is worth so much admiration. Okay, here comes the breakup text energy. I don't think the narrative is bad, but it is messy and inconclusive. It starts off really strong. I think Mel is a great protagonist and is an interesting flip on Zagreus. While Zag was constantly trying to run away from home to the surface, Mel is constantly descending into the underworld in efforts of saving a family she never knew. The game also begins in a much darker way. We learn that our beloved family from Hell is missing, most likely held captive by the cruel titan of time, Kronos. Meanwhile, Kronos and his minions are also actively waging war against Olympus. So already, Hades 2 is a much higher stakes story than the comparatively simple days of Zag's quest. It's as if the sequel to Ferris Bueller's Day Off was suddenly The Two Towers. And I think that can work. Good sequels go deeper, and if there's any source material that has room for variety, it's Greek mythology. If I could try and diagnose the single issue that is at the root of basically all of the narrative shortcomings of Hades 2, it is this. The structure of the game does not pair well with the story they are trying to tell. I realize now, in retrospect, that keeping Zagreus' story personal and relatively simple was the right call for this style of cyclical storytelling. In Hades, whenever you die, you just go back home and get more dialogue with all of those characters. The only event that's happening in that game is Zagreus choosing to run away, something the player experiences alongside him and, in a sense, chooses to do with him. The game reframes why Zagreus is still running away the more you play, which is brilliant, but what grounds the storytelling is that Zagreus is the only constant variable in the plot. Meanwhile, in Mel's story, there is a war happening on two fronts. Whenever you die in Hades 2, Mel casts a last-minute teleportation spell that takes her back to the crossroads, and another night passes in the worlds of the game. So in that sense, as time continues to pass, there should be a rising sense of urgency as Kronos continues his attack on the gods and the fate of Mel's family remains unknown. But because of the cyclical structure of a roguelike, the game's plot and stakes basically have to wait for you to catch up with them, or vice versa. And things also can't really fundamentally change because then the game would end, and justifying more runs would be even more difficult. Okay, the elephant in the room here is the ending of Hades 2. I'm not going to spoil it, but if you're watching this, you probably know of its mixed reception. Supergiant even recently updated it due to consistently negative feedback. On one hand, I respect they are receptive to player feedback, but I also worry about them and other developers feeling like they need to change their vision due to fan demand. That is a separate and larger conversation without a definitive answer, but I do think making story revisions due to fan reaction can be a slippery slope. All of that aside, I am no stranger to games I love having endings no one likes. And my point is that, while I also found the ending of Hades 2 a bit odd and abrupt, the narrative issues that hold the game back from me were present far before the credits rolled. I think the characters are a lot of fun, the dialogue is very sharp, there are great moments and cool ideas as always. But Hades 2 is a sequel that goes wide rather than deep, and it ends up feeling spread thin with little to no narrative payoff for many of the stories it masterfully sets up. The thing is, Hades 2 is really fun. It's really fun. The weapons are extremely weird and interesting, the boons are so creative and allow for endless possibilities. I love all of Mel's pets, I love hanging out with Dora and Odysseus, and despite my critiques of the story, I still love existing in this world. There were moments in that divisive ending and epilogue that made me feel truly emotional. I love this family, and there's a reason family is at the center of all mythology and storytelling. They're often the people in our lives we spend the most time complaining about, but also have a deep, unconditional love for. In a much smaller form, that's kind of how I feel about Hades 2. It made me feel many things, but also undeniably made my year a happier time. I commend Supergiant for making a sequel rather than simply updating Hades indefinitely with DLC and such. I think that was the riskier move, and I cannot wait to see what the team makes next, and against all odds, I will keep playing Hades 2 for that epilogue. And that axe. Well, scythe, I suppose. I favor the aspect of Thanatos, personally.
Three, two, one, go!
I don't care about cars. I feel nothing about them other than gratitude for the conveniences of travel and deep concern for their negative effects on the state of the environment. But I like when a game can explain to me the reason behind someone else's passion. There are two games that have given me at least a silhouette of automobile romance. One is Forza Horizon, and the other is Ridge Racer 2. We happened to do a big episode about the PSP for Into the Aether this year, and both Brendon and myself walked away from that experience gaga for the Ridge. Racing games like this tend to be released as technical showcases for new hardware, and I deeply love the PSP aesthetic of Ridge Racer 2. There's something about a PSP sunset that just completely removes my anxiety and gives me some strange sense of hope. This is also one of the only racing games I play in first person. The mix of the soundtrack and the fuzzy, warm visuals and the mechanical simplicity, it makes any session of this game something resembling a meditative experience. While I'm very proud of that PSP episode, I can kind of sum it up in one sentence. Ridge Racer 2 rules, and you should be playing it right now. Though not on PS5. Either emulate it or get a PSP, the port is kind of weird. Despelote is dreamlike in every sense of the word. Its presentation is a surreal mashup of mixed media, its narrative is a hybrid of autobiography and creative nonfiction, and the entire experience is in orbit of 2002 Quito, when all of Ecuador was dreaming about their football team entering the World Cup. Nostalgia itself is also a type of dream, a memory left unchecked that is turned into something else. Despelote plays with reality as much as its characters play football. We often kick a ball around as the protagonist Julian, but sometimes we play as Julian playing a football video game, and then sometimes the point of view shifts to an omniscient narrator, or even the ball itself. While Despelote succeeds at being a heartfelt and vulnerable work of nonfiction about childhood and one's growing sense of the world around them, Despelote also thoughtfully interrogates nostalgia and the form a memory takes when it becomes increasingly distant. The team behind Despelote simultaneously want to provide the player with an authentic depiction of this important moment in Ecuadorian history, but they also seem to realize that any living records of this moment, much like our memories, are imperfect. I myself have no memory or relevant experience of football outside of being on my middle school soccer team where I stood around and watched the autumnal leaves change color. But Despelote made me feel what this sport meant for Ecuador in 2002. And it reminded me that sometimes the most precious memories we attempt to recall feel mundane and ordinary in the actual moment. The importance of something often doesn't take shape until after it's over. And there's a tragic beauty to that. Have you ever been so late to the party it becomes embarrassing to show up? You ever text a friend, "Hey, I finally watched Jaws. Turns out it's really exciting, it's suspenseful," and they just kind of feel sick and unimpressed? Anyway, I finally played Metal Gear Solid. Turns out it's really good.
Trust your instincts as a gamer.
We are definitely in the thick of a new roguelite era. It also seems like many of them are mashups. There's an old joke about how every tech startup used to be like Uber, but for blank. And these days it feels like every roguelite is like Balatro, but with blank. To be clear, this isn't a bad thing, but the reality is it's a very crowded genre right now and it takes a lot to stand out. But I'm happy to report that Star Vaders absolutely stands out. This game rules. If you pitch it as a mashup, then it's arguably Slay the Spire meets Space Invaders. It also feels like it has elements of Into the Breach and an art style reminiscent of Game Boy Advance titles like Advance Wars. I think it's extremely cool when games wear their influences proudly, but I also think it's important to pull from as many things as possible, since the alchemy of many influences usually morphs into a new identity. When you're playing Star Vaders, it very quickly stops feeling like this game meshed with that game, and it just feels like Star Vaders, which is an accomplishment in and of itself. To explain the gameplay a bit, aliens and robots descend from the top of the screen to the bottom. If they get into your zone, they start generating doom. Doom carries over between battles, and if it reaches 5, it's game over. There are 3 basic mechs to choose from: the Gunner, which fires bullets and bombs at enemies from afar; the Stinger, which largely focuses on melee combat but can zip around and throw projectiles; and the Bizarre Keeper, which fights with magical spells and summons. Each of the 3 mechs dramatically changes the feeling of the game. And on top of that, each mech has at least 3 pilots, all with their own unique cards, artifacts, and strategies. My favorite pilots so far are Noelle, who can freeze cards in her hand for future turns, and Kaya, who can throw her cards onto the grid as booby traps. The game is very hard, sometimes in ways that can be frustrating. Usually the difficulty aids this feeling of being a lone mech in space, pulling off victory against all odds. But the game can abruptly change the rules in ways that might leave you more confused than determined to try again. I would recommend reading all of the enemy descriptions, especially in the later acts of the game, since enemies start generating doom in dramatically different ways compared to the earlier battles. Still, it intimidates and excites me in equal measure to know how much more game I have to see. I think once I unlock the remaining pilots, I'll start digging into the challenges for my favorite characters. I also like how the game teases a bit of story the more you play. I'm curious how much more of that narrative element there is. The 2.0 version of this game also just came out, so if you haven't played Star Invaders yet, now is the time. I did it. This year I finally finished the original Trails in the Sky, and now the rest of my life can truly begin. If there's one defining trait of the entire Trails series, it is the pacing. It's slow. At times, glacial. But the end result of the slower pace is a world that feels lived in and characters that feel real and emotionally grounded despite the fantasy elements at play. My personal pitch for Trails in the Sky is, what if Kiki's delivery service slowly transformed into Full Metal Alchemist? What starts off as an extremely light and vibes-driven sojourn becomes a story about societal corruption and the scars that war leaves behind, both on a country and the individuals that live there. Trails in the Sky also directly interrogates the Chosen One narrative so commonly found in RPGs by stating that, despite how cool and powerful individual bracers are, it is only through collective action that we have a chance at stopping wars and ultimately saving the world. While I don't think Trails in the Sky will ever have the broad appeal of retro RPG classics like FF7, I think it absolutely deserves an honored place in RPG history, and I'm glad to see the series become increasingly popular. If you have yet to begin your Trails journey, the remake of Trails in the Sky is the perfect place to start. Over the last 6 years, begging for the release date of Silksong during any gaming-related event or stream became the 2020's version of yelling, "Play Freebird." Hornet herself, in the Night with Clown Makeup, became the accidental mascots of doomed anticipation. Yet here we are. Silksong is out. There's no longer any need to cry into the void. We got what we've been waiting for. So, how does it feel? It feels great. Silksong is an unbelievable achievement. I really admired the first Hollow Knight, but something about Silksong is connecting with me more on a personal level. Admittedly, I'm still in the thick of the second act because I suck. But even a little over halfway through, I feel much more emotionally invested in Silksong than I do in most games of this genre. I really love seeing her interact with the other bugs and how both she and the rest of the ensemble change over the course of the game. It's also always fun to spend hours exploring this world and then see Hornet eventually comment on something. We see if her view of things matches our own, or if she has new information about the world and her quest she's been keeping to herself. In Silksong, dialogue is just rare enough that when we hear from Hornet or other characters, it's just as exciting as finding a new item or another path forward. Combat, of course, is excellent.
As a gamer,
the feeling of movement in general is so fun and dynamic that even running around lost is somehow enjoyable. I especially like all the different crests and how they completely change Hornet's playstyle. I'm personally a big fan of the Wanderer crest because it makes platforming more straightforward, and raising attack speed is always a plus for me. But I love that everyone will have a different playstyle they go to bat for. Despite its difficulty, this is a game I want to see through. I have faith in myself. Let's see how far that takes me. I'm realizing my go-toy list every year is just going to be Trails and Yakuza games for the rest of time, and that's a fate I fully accept. Yakuza, now known as the Like a Dragon series, likely needs no introduction here, but I'll make a quick pitch for those not familiar. As a series, the Yakuza and Like a Dragon games are of two halves. One half is a compelling, melodramatic crime drama full of the world's hottest men punching the worst people alive in the face. The other half is an open-world game full of disarmingly goofy side quests, mini-games, and literally other video games. The magic of this series is its ability to seamlessly combine the two. You would think an entire subplot about Kiryu getting really into Pocket Circuit would be out of place in the relentlessly dark world of organized crime, but it works. The closest parallel I can think of is the Persona series, where half the experience is dungeon crawling and fighting demons, and the other half is a life sim where your only task is choosing who to hang out with. The sillier side of Yakuza works not only to add levity, but also to develop and humanize the characters. Yakuza 0 is the origin story of both the series face Kazuma Kiryu and beloved heel Goro Majima. The game takes place in both Kamurocho and Sotenbori in the 1980s. While both settings are fictional, they're based on their real-life counterparts Dotonbori and Kabukicho. The backdrop of the story is also reflective of Japanese history. During the 1980s, Japan was experiencing a surge of economic growth, now known to be a bubble that eventually popped. This fleeting allure of wealth and success functions well as a tragic framing device. At this point in their lives, Kiryu and Majima both want to enter the world of the Yakuza for very different and personal reasons, and everyone around them is trying to make it big while our two heroes seek to live by a code of honor, or at least a personal lifestyle that no one else seems to believe in. Yakuza 0 functions well both as one's entry point to the series and also as a prequel to be experienced at any time. Seeing who characters were before they became recurring favorites is always exhilarating, and seeing through 0 will basically give you all the information you need to begin your Yakuza journey in earnest. Yakuza 0 is also one of the biggest games in the franchise, and by big, I mean the sheer number of things to do. If you participate in any of the activities enough, eventually you will unlock some sort of strange side quest related to that game. I think the team behind Yakuza Like a Dragon know that these side quests are secretly the heart of the game, because as a prize for beating Yakuza 0, you just get to continue existing in this world and doing whatever you want. I mentioned earlier that good sequels usually go deep rather than wide, and that seems to be the central philosophy of this series. Every game tends to focus on similar characters in similar places, but we get a different side of them, a different era, and ultimately we get to spend more time with people we love in a place that, despite everything, feels like home. Sometimes choosing your GOTY is a bit like deciding who to sit with at lunch. If we continue the analogy, choosing the 100 line as my GOTY has me eating lunch in the bathroom stall by myself. But you know what? Authenticity is the spark of true community, so I'm making my own lunch table. Sit with me if you dare. The 100 line Last Defense Academy is a hard game to pitch, but that's kind of the point. The game is co-directed by Kazutaka Kodaka and Kotaro Uchikoshi, who are best known individually as the creators of Danganronpa and Zero Escape, both formative series in the world of visual novels. The 100 line visibly contains elements from both series, but has a very unique structure. It's mostly a visual novel, peppered with surprisingly fun tactics battles and light life sim mechanics. Also, after the player completes a 30-hour prologue, without spoiling specifics, the game turns into a branching path adventure game where every choice can put you on one of 20 different routes with 100 different endings. The prologue opens in a way many Danganronpa fans will find familiar. One day, a group of teenagers wakes up in a mysterious classroom seemingly in the middle of nowhere. They then meet a bizarre mascot creature who explains that they are now residents of the Last Defense Academy and humanity's last great hope against the wicked invaders. The rules are simple. If they fight and defend the school for 100 days, they will get to go back home. Where the story goes from there is truly beyond words, but I'll say this much. The 100-line Last Defense Academy is a maximalist masterpiece. Every idea Kodaka, Uchikoshi, and team wanted to explore feels like it's present here. And while not all 20 routes and 100 endings are of equal quality, the 4 routes I've finished so far all felt like different games I could have put on this list. What keeps me coming back for more routes in this game is largely the cast. I love this ensemble of reprehensible freaks. So many games with life sim and social elements go out of their way to make their casts nice and cool and endearing, and I love how 100 line makes you initially repulsed by everyone, to the point where the only somewhat normal character is always on the verge of vomiting. And the miraculous thing is that I eventually loved the whole ensemble. In a story with this many possibilities, every character here has the potential to be the hero, the villain, the love interest, or the comic relief. I wouldn't say it's the kind of game where you need to play every route in order to get the full story. It's more like you watched one season of TV and then 20 different people wrote their own version of a second season. The team behind the 100 line have been pretty vocal about how the development of this game almost bankrupted them. I don't think anyone should be working under that amount of stress, but the tenacity of this team reminds me of the recent Guillermo del Toro quote about art and AI. He said, "The value of art is not how much it costs and how little effort it requires. It's how much you would risk to be in its presence." In this case, the value of the 100 line is that everyone involved risked almost everything to bring their dream project to life. There's a lot I want to say about this game. How it explores what horrors decent people are willing to do when the promise of a normal life is dangled in front of their face. How it ponders what the inherent value of humanity's existence is if our survival depends on the destruction of another, and how the game believes that despite how weird, gross, off-putting, and evil we and our world can be, moments of peace and love are still possible and worth creating, no matter how bad shit gets. I want to say even more, and maybe one day I will. I sure do have 90 more endings to see. But for now, I'll just say this. In 2025, the 100 line Last Defense Academy was my game of the year. We did it, friends. 2025 is over, and so is this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. I love putting these together. It's a very fun annual tradition, so thank you once again for being here. Bit of news from me. I just started a Patreon for this very channel. If you like what I do here and you want to support me directly, you can now do so via Patreon. Links to that will be in the video description. The plan right now for that is to make Patreon-exclusive videos every now and then, and also make a monthly newsletter with writing from me, art from me, and also writing and art from my friends occasionally. I'd love to be able to commission artists, make a collaborative space, so more on that in the future, but that now exists, and I'm very excited to see what comes of it. So thank you once again for watching. I'll see you in the next year. Bye-bye.